Hello and welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And just as last week and the week before, the big thing in the news is the conflict in the Middle East. But I would really like your reaction, Dr. Lopkin, in terms of the change in attitude, both in the world, but more shockingly, the world was always the world. In fact, I believe in 75, the UN wanted to equate Zionism with racism. But the reaction to this conflict in the United States, it's showing a lot of fractures, isn't it?
It is. Unfortunately, we have a very large, college educated, ignorant
Well,
population.
let me interject one thing. College participants, education, that's kind of on the fence, isn't it?
Well, that's my point. These folks have not been educated. They
They're
went to
morons.
college and they've been indoctrinated, but they haven't actually learned their history. They haven't actually learned what has gone on with the Jewish people for thousands of years. And so they've all been turned into these anti Semites. And unfortunately, anti Semitism is not new, but it's now coming out of the woodwork again, as it
But it
seems
was
to
it was
do.
always something that was so a province of the liberal elites always condemned anti-Semitism. That's why so many Jews are liberal Democrats. That when this conflict that has been blown up.
It has. And, we've talked about this before, why this is happening, because as the Democrats went more and more to the left, they love victims. Well, guess what? The Jews aren't victims. As much as people try to make them victims, as many times and as many groups as have tried to exterminate the Jews ultimately have kept winning. In fact, I'm not sure who said it, but there was a great comment a week or two ago. Uh, Somebody had said about Hamas, it's like, great, bring it on. You'll try to kill us, we'll beat you, and we'll make a holiday out of it.
Well, it's very yes. It is extremely interesting though the moral equivalency. Even you talk about in higher education. I read this little message from a president of a Connecticut university, which I found disturbing. So, a lot of gobbledygook, but I'll just really get real quick on it. Is on campus, these grave events remind us to reinforce our social justice values. How about outrage, genius? Okay, and then in this spirit are all these bullshit whatever groups or I should say offices, and again taxpayer funded, the D division, the blah 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 division, the Muslim Student Association, and all this kind of and the Multicultural Council and the Interfaith Center will plan a peace rally and teach-ins about the deep-rooted complexities of the conflict. How about the complexity of chopping off babies' heads? And by the way, when they see deep rooted complexities, that means the Jews are to blame. I'm just kind of rephrasing that. Thank you very much. Your comments on that? What a
Yeah.
limp, what response.
And you know,
This event should reaffirm our social justice. Are you really?
yeah,
Really? He's got a
coll-
PhD, by the way.
colleges across the country have failed to properly condemn terrorism. And fortunately, people are stepping up. Colleges over the last 3 weeks have lost millions of dollars in
Good.
donations because in fact yesterday was supposed to be Columbia University's big fundraiser, and they had to cancel it because their donors told them, you have not condemned Hamas, you are coddling these pro Palestinian violent protesters. And that's something else that needs to be pointed out. Take a look at how many of these protests turn violent. It is always the pro Palestinians that turn violent. There has not been one pro Israel protest that turned violent.
Gee, why didn't I see that in the press?
Yeah,
Huh?
that,
What?
that,
What? What? There you go. I guess I missed it anyway. Yes, 100% correct. But they not only should have their donations curtailed or stopped, but they all should have. And we talked about this last week, and I think it was an excellent point. I think you're the one who brought it up. Is that people need to rethink who they're hiring. Are these, so-called college grads? Do they really know what the hell they're talking about? Do they really have an education, or has it been a $250,000 indoctrination into bullshit?
yeah,
It's a rhetorical question, by the way.
that situation is also getting out of hand because you have Dave Chappelle had audience members walk out on him in Boston because he suggested that Israel was to blame, and he started criticizing companies for removing their job offers from the students that had signed these anti-Israel letters. Well, you know what? These kids have the right to their opinion. They have free speech. But these companies have, one, a duty not to hire anybody who's preaching hate, and two, they have the responsibility to their customers, their employees, and if they're public companies, their shareholders, not to hire morons.
That is true, but you also bring up a bigger issue, and that's the increasing divide. And it's not a recent thing, by the way. It was a cover story, believe it or not, over 30 years ago. But the increasing animosity and divide between two groups that used to be joined at the hip, and that is African Americans and Jews. You have an increasing hatred of by African Americans of not only Israel but of, I think there's also a spillover into the Jewish population overall. Your comments
Well, we just saw Black Lives Matter
endorsing
essentially
Hamas,
endorse Hamas. Yes. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And
but it's
part of
true.
it is true. And Jews are increasingly standing alone. And a lot of the elite so-called elite educational institutions have turned their back on Jews. They're promoting anti-Semitism, and in fact, the playwright David Mamet uh, several days ago made a statement that said, when Jewish students come home for Thanksgiving, their parents should not send them back to these colleges.
Thank you very much. Yeah, because let's see, let's cut the shit. College is a business, okay? Like it or not, sorry. And what do businesses respond to? Money. Cut off the money, they might change their act. Just a
And
suggestion.
that's another thing. You hit the nail on the head about colleges being businesses.
The
I
business.
I think it's time that their nonprofit status was re-examined.
Thank you very much. It is the biggest scam, whatever you can imagine. It is a for profit organization. Let's cut this shit right now. Sorry, it is. The days of the scholars and we're all erudites and stuff. Yeah, please stop it. You're killing me. And speaking of colleges gone south, George Washington U. By the way, great name, George Washington U. Not the best institution. Sorry to throw shade on that school, but they had one of their geniuses, a bunch of genius students projecting on the library with a projector that is free Palestine C to C, which for those out there really means get rid of the Jews. C to
Yeah,
C,
that's
there's really
yeah,
nowhere else to go.
that's
Genius
that's something that has been completely ignored, is that they keep saying from
from C
shore
to
to
C.
sea, from sea to sea. From that is just code for eliminate the Jews. They want to wipe out Israel. That is what that statement is saying. And even Barack Obama, who was not a friend of Israel when he was president,
By any
ca-
stretch of the
yeah,
imagination, yes.
came out a few days ago and pointed out that Israel has been the one working towards a two-state solution. It was the Palestinians that kept walking away.
Okay, well, no, that is a huge point, Dr. Lopkin, okay? And it goes ties directly to our high system. What they've taught is how the Jews got a disproportionate share. I'm talking in the 1948, 46 of Palestine, blah blah. But they just kind of conveniently not mention or do not teach that. By the way, Barack Obama is 100% correct. In the early 90s, Israel, even Yasser Arafat, the scumbag that he was shocked that Israel gave them everything but the kitchen sink. And what did he do? What did the shithead do? Walk away from it and go to his 5-star hotel in Paris. But that's not really ever mentioned, is it?
No, because it doesn't go along with the liberal storyline that the Palestinians are victims. Guess what? The Palestinians have essentially been self governing since 2007. Hamas
And
has
self
had
destroying.
Yes, Hamas has had complete control of the Gaza Strip. They could very easily have built up import export operations to bring in food. They could have built factories to create jobs. No, all they did was build missiles and tunnels to eliminate Israel.
And piss away the money. And by the way, you have an excellent point. You're next to Israel, okay? A one of the top, if not the top, software, computer innovators, high tech engines of the world, even though it's a small country. So you're next to them. Instead of building tunnels and missiles and all that other shit, if you had like a trade and business ties, by default, the West Bank would be relatively prosperous. I don't think that's a crazy concept.
The West Bank would, the Gaza Strip would,
Strip, yes.
And Israel has offered that time and time again, and the Palestinians kept walking away. Why? Because the only thing that Hamas and Hezbollah and these other Iranian-backed groups want is the elimination of the Jewish people. Period. That's the only thing they're interested in as far as Israel's concerned.
There's no question about that. And speaking of Iran, kind of interesting. The Biden administration is like Blinken and others, him in particular, starting to talk a little tougher about Iran, but that's in the face of over 13 attacks by their proxies directly on U.S. war assets. That's
Yeah,
surprising.
we had another attack today, which brings the total to 14. And these are attacks on American soldiers in the Middle East. This is not proxy attacks to somebody we're working with. They are directly attacking American military bases. And Biden keeps saying, and the administration as a whole keeps saying, well, we want to keep this from expanding into a regional war. Guess what? It's
It is genius.
already, yes, it's already there. The only ones that haven't acknowledged that is us.
Yes, and maybe Australia. They had the meeting between Biden and the Prime Minister of Australia. Much younger, much smarter than Biden, but still a stupid asshole. In the middle of all this, what are they talking about? Is friggin' climate change, right? Biden declines any questions. Why am I saying this? Because again, he appears weak, and that's why all this shit is happening. And then when he does have his press conference, it was an literal like you just again, what weekend at Bernie's part 27 at this point, just rambling on, looking at these stupid notes, probably like what do they call Mad Libs back in the day, right, with like cartoons and pictures on it. Uh, Again, this would not be happening. Let's be real clear. If anyone else, almost anyone else, Barack Obama included, 100% would not be happening. And God forbid, Iran indirectly or directly firing on U.S. military assets, there wouldn't be just, some shucking and jiving. There'd be direct action. Am I not correct? And the world
Yes,
watches this buffoon time and time again make a complete ass of himself and show that he's out of this world.
No, this is on the doorstep of Joe Biden. This would not have happened under the Trump administration. It would not have happened under the Obama administration. It wouldn't have happened under either Bush or Clinton. This
No
is
way.
something that is singularly, it's not the Democrats' fault, it's not the Republicans' fault, it is Joe Biden's fault. And it is absolutely unbelievable that they cannot give a straight answer about defending Jews. The Karim Jean Pierre was asked straight out if the administration was concerned about rising anti Semitism, and she gave an answer saying how important it was to avoid Islamophobia and didn't answer about anti Semitism.
Yeah, and meanwhile, in the Biden administration, they had almost over in the hundreds of staffers signing a petition, basically expressing their discontent with their pro-Israeli policy. Gee, amazing. But on the other hand, and in a lighter note, you had 50 Cent, who I really do like. Basically, had a sent out on social media, "Get the f off the beach." Yeah,
Yeah,
please do. No, no, stay on the beach. You were better off. Please just stay on the beach. But I thought that was funny and
50 Cent
interesting.
was absolutely right because everything Biden does just exudes weakness. We have the greatest global crisis going on since 9/11, and
Easily.
he's taking vacations on the beach rather than and the administration, oh, but he's in touch, we got
No,
no,
no, that's bullshit.
he is sending the message that he doesn't care or that he's oblivious to what's going on.
I think it's that he is incapable, and I believe it's by design that they want him out of the picture because they're holding their breath, gasping. Because if he was in Washington and had to answer any questions, he does from time, it would create more controversy. There'd be more. It would escalate the situation. So stay on the beach. Go, stepping on some piss clams or whatever. But that's what they're telling him. Am I not correct?
I think they are. I mean, they can't seem to control what he says. They were able to get a couple of good speeches out of him. They were short. There was like 4 days between the speeches where nobody saw hide or hair from him. So I'm guessing that they had him locked away recovering from the speech so that he could make another one. But he is just not capable.
There's no question about it. But speaking of someone that is capable, is Rashida Tlaib, right? One of the squad members. I like that. I'm not a big fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she basically is putting together an initiative to censure her. I think it's long overdue, quite frankly. And she basically helped instigate the pro Hamas Capitol protest slash riot. For all the press's outrage about January 6th, I haven't heard shit about this.
No, they were incredibly quiet about the pro
Crickets,
Palestinians uh, going into the
insurrection.
Capitol, completely egged on by Talib. And you know what? I applaud Taylor Greene's attempt to get her censured. I don't think that goes far enough. She needs to be, at the very least, removed from all committees. Quite frankly, I think she needs to be expelled from Congress.
I would
And
vote for that. Yes.
given given and there were a number of Democrats that claimed this about Trump after January 6th. But given her participation in that riot, I think she needs to be investigated by the Justice Department for treason.
100% correct. It will obviously never happen. But yes, she's basically, it's despicable that she's a member of Congress. But that's what happens when you have a screwed up immigration system where basically in her districts and others, like Omar, they're basically 100% on board with the extermination of Israel in the good old USA. Thank you, the United States immigration and Nationalization Department, they're really a first rate organization, aren't they, Dr. Lopkin? Really trying to strive to get the best and the brightest in the good old United States, aren't they?
Okay, I feel we need to clarify that comment because the folks on the front lines of the southern border, the immigration agents that are trying to deal with that, they are doing the best to do their job. It's the upper echelon, the
Yes,
folks that are
you're right.
making the decisions that
It's
are
the
the
geniuses from
problem.
Harvard,
It's
yes.
yes, it is not the agents. They're doing their best. They're good men and women who are trying to serve their country, and they are being stymied by the administration and these left wing wackos that want open borders and just let everybody in.
And actually hate America and have no value to American culture, American exceptionalism. The list can go on. These people, again, and when you think about it, if there's going to be an epitaph on the decline or the destruction of America, I think a key player will be our higher educational system. How does that sound?
Oh, absolutely. I
They
mean,
did their part, didn't they?
this has been going on, and we've mentioned this book before, but back in the 70s, Rules for Radicals, they put out the handbook, followed it to the letter, and now we have a radical class of students who are so stupid that they don't understand that they're anti-Semites.
Oh no, you
And
have a really good point, Dr. Lopkin. No, in the '60s, when you had radical socialists or whatever on campus, I would have to contend that the higher education system was not in a devolved situation, a desperate situation that it is right now. So you could actually have people that would be protesting something, but have the brains and the educational background to actually have opinions and formulate opinions. I think fast forward 40 years, and I think you have people that are paying 30 times the tuition, but are getting 1% of the education. So they are, as you said, too stupid to formulate their own opinion. So they'll just go lockstep because it's actually, some of it is just cool. And it
yeah,
is
and
exactly what you said, is that in modern liberalism, it's the victim. So it's really cool to support the victim.
exactly, except
Good summation?
they've manufactured the victim in this case
No
because
doubt.
Palestine is not victims.
It's a
And
self-imposed
it is
victim. It's like having
yes,
your friend who can't hold on to a job, drinking like a wild man. Yeah, okay, he's down and out, or she's down and out. But gee, whose fault is it? Sorry, I can't do anything for you.
exactly. And the Israeli Defense Forces released body cam footage that they had captured from Hamas terrorists. This is Hamas's own footage showing the atrocities. And they made a statement saying they cannot believe that they have to release these videos to combat people saying it didn't happen.
But they want it
And,
not to happen. And you
and
have
they
shitheads
have
in the press like CNN's Christine Amanpour. I thought that ship has sailed, but CNN, they'll probably hire
uh,
anyone. She'll probably go to Harvard next, but she's basically said that most people agree with the Queen of Jordan that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, but a force of liberation. There you go.
yeah, and
That's who's in our press.
let's be realistic about Jordan here. The Queen of Jordan has no power. She doesn't rule, you know, it's just it is absolutely amazing. Hamas rules Gaza. Lebanon is ruled by Hamas. If the Queen of Jordan really believed this, then she'd be bringing in Palestinian refugees. But she's refused. Just like
So has
every
Egypt.
other, yes, just
Yeah.
like every other Muslim country. They know the Palestinians are not these peace loving people. Now, there are civilians that just want to go about their lives, but Hamas, Hezbollah, they use these people as human shields. They hide among them. So none of these countries in the Middle East want the Palestinians coming because they've seen Hamas use them as cover.
But you'll never hear that with Christine Amanpour, and you're 100% correct, Dr. Locke, and it's been going on for longer than you can imagine. By the way, but yes, in the press, it's the way it's portrayed is everyone in the Palestinians is the greatest people, peace loving, and yeah. Well, how come none of your neighbors won't even take you in on a temporary basis? I don't know the answer to that. I actually
And
do, but I'm just being flippant.
And, and you know, I mean, the media is complicit in this too. Last week we talked about the hospital bombing, and we were actually one of the first media outlets to say, no, this was a missile that was fired by Islamic Jihad that went wrong. It didn't hit the hospital, it hit the parking lot. It took the New York Times almost a week to admit they got it wrong, and they're still making excuses for using Hamas's press release as their source. There are other media outlets, MSNBC for one, CNN, that still haven't corrected their stories.
MSNBC, they should change their name to the Hamas Network. Okay, they're not only just slightly pro Palestine, they're right on board, baby, right on board. In fact, yes, they should look at having their basically broadcast license revoked. They're an arm of Hamas at this point and terrorists. Sorry, it's true.
It is. It really is. And it's all, you know, we talked about higher education. We talked about the liberal media. I don't even think that these folks are aware of the severe damage that they are responsible for. They're
Thanks, an
following,
open question.
yeah, they're following their ideology. I have no doubt that, like Hamas, they believe their ideology is correct. But the the folks over at MSNBC, the folks over at
They
Harvard,
crossed the line.
they have no idea of the damage they're causing, and it is time they are held responsible for it.
Well done. Um, I think Jews are increasingly taking responsibility because there's a number of polls, and we talked about this for years, even possibly on terrestrial radio. Um, Jews are increasingly moving towards the Republican Party, and it's actually very interesting as well. New York, who has the highest Jewish population in the United States. I don't think Trump could ever win, but he's only 9 points behind when he lost in the last election by over 20 points. So I think that's a problem. I think the Democrats have a anti-Semitic and an anti-Jewish problem that could spill over in the polls. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the Jewish population is finally realizing
Waking up.
that
Hello. Yes.
yes, the Democrats are not their friends. Not only are they moving to the Republican Party, but gun sales among the Jewish population is skyrocketing because Jews no longer feel safe in their own communities. When was the last time you heard a Jewish person talk about New York City as being anti-Semitic? And now
Never.
you have Jews at Columbia, at NYU, at Hunter talking about the fact that they don't feel safe on campus. This is unprecedented here in America.
No, it certainly is. I think it's never been more precarious, and I think it's showing up in the polls and the action of Jews finally realizing they're not your buddy. And just like, Minority Whip Jeffries, who's obviously the Democrat, second in command, so to speak. He's a long history of, let's just say, a little gray area on anti Semitism. And what does he have to say about this conflict? Crickets, nothing. You speak by not speaking, correct?
Yeah, no, there have been far too many people who have been far too silent, and it is truly disgusting. And what absolutely amazed me is how long the Biden administration kept saying, well, we have not seen the evidence that Iran is behind this. Senator Richard Blumenthal came out and stated point blank they have seen the evidence. They know for a fact Iran is behind it, and the Biden administration does not want to confront them. Well, that's got to change also. And fortunately, little by little, senators and congresspeople are coming out to
That's what.
hold Biden to the
Great
fire.
point, Dr. Larkin. That's how it's going to happen. It's going to come from the ground up. And, thank good kudos for Blumenthal. Not a big fan of him, but it's finally he woke up and smelled the coffee and stopped talking or stopped looking at his own self-aggrandization and look at his own people, the Jews. For once, he spoke up against his party and in favor of his own people. Correct?
Yes, and it's far overdue.
Oh
And the
God,
fact
yeah.
the fact of the matter is, and what absolutely astounds me is that once again, AOC, while she refuses to condemn anti Semitism, she's trying to walk that line where she doesn't look like she's anti Semitic because her
She is.
district has a lot of Jews in it. And if
Any
they
Jew in
come,
her district that votes for her is a complete moron.
yeah, they've got to
There you go.
remove her. But this is why when the votes came down to fund the Iron Dome in Israel, if you
She
remember,
cried.
she cried, but she voted present, not against it, because she didn't want to lose the votes.
I think her ship has sailed. I'm really
I
being
hope
honest with
so.
you. I do too. Another ship that I hope has more than sailed, I hope sunk, the UN chief tried to walk back his disgusting comments about that this Hamas outrage didn't happen in a vacuum, bringing up 56 years of horrible occupation. Nikki Haley, to her credit, said he should immediately resign. And this shithead, that's all he's concerned about really, is being anti Semitic and also global warming. Just a complete moron. And that, if you really had a president, he might pull the plug on some funding for the UN. It hasn't done shit in 70 years anyway, so who cares?
No, it is time the US stopped
Goodbye.
funding the UN. We are responsible for the bulk of the UN's
Thank you. Yes.
budget, and that needs to stop. The anti Semitism, it's not just the Secretary General that's
No, it's
there now. The
rampant.
organization has been anti Semitic for decades. And it is time the US stood up and said, you know what? You need to clean house, and we're not going to pay for you encouraging terrorists.
That would be good, but obviously not with Biden because he's basically concerned more with just putting one foot in front of the other, and that's basically his biggest challenge of the day. Sometimes he makes it, sometimes he doesn't. Uh, in the political realm of things, we have Mike Johnson just, I believe, went over the threshold to become the Republican Speaker. I think that's good because it finally puts that shit to bed. Thank you, Matt Gates, you boy genius.
Gates needs to be removed, but
And
Jeffries is just as much to blame for this because this was 8 Republicans and every Democrat that refused to vote for any of these people as speaker. Guess what? If just the centrist Democrats had come up and said, you know what, this is bull. We're not going to support this move. We're going to, keep McCarthy in. This whole thing would have gone nowhere. But the Democrats wanted to shut down the government. They wanted to be able to blame the Republicans. They were playing politics instead of doing what was best for the American people. I still blame mostly Gates. He was the one that started this whole thing, but the Democrats are just as much to blame.
well, Jeffrey's just a political thug anyway. Um, And again, to close on the political front, we have some very interesting developments on the Democratic side. Dean Phillips deciding, and a moderate, I believe, deciding to throw his hat in the ring. And also, maybe you can shed a little light on about the primary situation and how Uncle Joe might not be faring as well as he once thought he would be.
Yeah, Dean Phillips he's been looking into this for a while. He has officially announced he will be running for the Democratic uh, uh, presidential ballot. And what makes this really important is that now there is a real race for the Democratic nominee. And that's going to be difficult for Biden because the Biden administration has already announced they will not be on the ballot in New Hampshire because New Hampshire has refused to follow the DNC and move their primary after
To
South
rig their primary.
Carolina's.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, there you
And,
go.
the DNC wants South Carolina to be first because that was the first primary that Biden won. And New Hampshire state law actually states that they have the first in the nation primary. And to comply with the DNC, they would have had to change their laws. The Republicans obviously were not going along with it. And quite frankly, neither were the state Democrats. So Biden has announced he's not even going to be on the ballot in New Hampshire. There's a good chance he won't be on the ballot in Iowa for the caucus because they're not moving their caucus after South Carolina. So he could be going into South Carolina once again down two primaries, and that's not going to look good for a sitting president.
a, a, a sitting and a stumbling president. You have to throw that one in there too. Who knows if he can even be standing at that point? He might be he might be a sitting president. You're correct. So, Dr. Lopkin, has the anti-Semitism continued on our social media platforms?
No, we were able to block those folks. And for the record, I do want to state that we were able to track back where these anti Semitic comments were coming from, and they were all coming from Egypt.
Really, surprise,
Yes.
surprise. Well, for a great show and our listeners, us in anywhere, any media that really encourages free speech and a free discussion. And our listeners can also suggest what they liked about the show, what they didn't, and what topics they would like us to cover, correct?
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. You can contact us through the Carnivore Radio Facebook page as well as xvadio.com/connect. And of course, you can find every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, the Carnivore Radio website, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you very much, Dr. Lopkin. Great show.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.